Welcome to another episode of Profitable Publishing. I'm Ashley, your host, and today we're going to be talking about what to do when you are stuck in indecision, when you are trying to figure something out and you just really can't decide. And so maybe you are thinking about, well, I don't know what book I want to publish next, or I'm not sure which marketing strategy is really going to work for me, or what offer to launch that's tied to your book. And so today we're going to be talking about strategies to overcome that indecision. I'm going to share some of my own personal experiences doing this, as well as some of the indecisiveness that I had with actually launching this podcast. And then we'll talk about how to overcome that. So, when it comes to feeling like you are stuck in analysis paralysis, there are typically a couple of reasons why that is the case. Now, of course, this isn't an exhaustive list, but typically when I'm working with folks, it's usually one of these few things. So maybe you are worried about how you are going to come off or how people are going to perceive you whenever you create your next book or whenever you try a marketing strategy or whatever the case may be. And so you can kind of experience some of that high school peer pressure situations of, okay, well, I don't know what they're going to think. I don't know if my audience will really resonate with this. And that's completely normal. That is totally normal. Feel all the feels, but don't let those things paralyze you. So when that happens, really think about, this is something that I kind of do to help me realize that this is not a fight or flight situation. It's just my brain telling me that something serious is happening when it's really not that deep. It's not that big of a deal. I play worst case scenario, and this is a game that I got from This Is Us. If you remember that show, it was actually my favorite show, honestly. It's not on the air anymore because it is finished, but Beth and Randall, two of the characters on there, would play worst case scenario. And so it's just a space for you to just pretty much brain dump all of the terrible things that could happen as a result of this decision. And that might sound kind of morbid if it's like that kind of situation, or it might sound like, okay, well, this is real pessimistic. But it actually helps you to get all of the things out there and really realize that the situations you're thinking of are probably not actually going to happen. And if you're someone who is a bit of a worrier, or if you are someone who is just spitting in the cycle of, okay, well, if I do this, then what's going to happen? If I do this, then what's going to happen? It gives you the space to like think those things through and actually get them out there so they're out of your head. So I invite you to do that with the situation. If I release this book and nobody buys it, okay, worst case scenario. Or if I try this marketing strategy, if I try to launch my YouTube channel to generate clients and tie it to my book, what's the worst case that could happen? And so once again, typically that's because you're worried about how you're going to be perceived. Another reason why you might be in indecision is because maybe you're worried about being consistent. And so transparency is in full effect right now. I was actually worried about being consistent with this podcast. Now, I had done previously a private podcast, and I really loved it. Like, I had a great time doing it. The people that were listening really enjoyed it, and it was very insightful. And it's called Pop and Pre-Sales, and it was actually tied to my book launch for Profitable Publishing with Pre-Orders. So tied to this book launch. And so it was a great experience, and I'm glad I did it. And that kind of inspired me to do this podcast. However, doing a short run private podcast is very different than doing a podcast that's just on habitually, week after week. If you do weekly episodes, or and it just felt kind of overwhelming before I even started. And I just kind of went in a spiral of like, okay, I don't know if I can do this. And so maybe you are feeling like, okay, maybe you're feeling the fear of consistency, because I'm someone who's great at being consistent in short spurts in terms of like, okay, launching this thing, and then I'm really good at getting that out. But sometimes when it comes to just like indefinite things, then it can be scary. And that sounds so wild to say, like I've done things for decades and I've worked at pretty much the same job when I was working for over a decade, and then went back to that same job. But anyway, say all that to say, it can just feel like it's too much. And so I had to really get over the fact of that it doesn't have to be crippling. It could be something where you batch episodes, which is already a strategy that I share with book marketing, batching episode or batching your content. And so it just was an easy application to think about it in podcasts, or just take a break. There's a podcaster who helped me to really think about and reframe my thoughts around the frequency of episodes, and also understanding that you don't have to release an episode each week and you can still be impactful. And so really just getting around people who have done the thing that you're wanting to do and who have been able to overcome the hurdle that you are currently stuck in is key. And that's why it's so important to have coaches and to have consultants to be able to support you. And so with that, going through that and talking through that process, it helped me to really think about, okay, like consistency doesn't have to be crippling, and that can be very freeing. And then you might also, so the next thing, you might also have the concern of perfectionism. And I call myself a recovering perfectionist because I don't do that anymore. Praise God, I'm freed from that. But maybe you feel like you have to do certain things right. So maybe because you are in a certain industry, people look up to you and you assume that everything you do just has to be golden. It has to be like perfect. And I did have a little bit of that. I'm just like, well, yeah, I mean, I'm a book marketing strategist. And so I like to do things right. And so if I'm doing this new thing, like I want to do it right, because this is another way to show my clients, my future clients, future customers, and my readers that like this is another area of marketing that I've mastered. And at the same time, especially nowadays, especially with the rise of AI and the just how how widespread that's become, people are attracted to imperfection. People are attracted to going behind the scenes of the process with you. They're attracted to really seeing that you're a human person, that you are not a bot, that you are actually who you say you are, and also that you make mistakes, and not in a way that they're trying to tear you down, but in a way that they want to like empathize with you and say, okay, well, I mean, if she did it, then I can do it too. Or if this is something she's working on, then like, okay, this makes sense, or she'll understand and she'll be relatable to me when I tell her XYZ. And so, and I say that because my coaching clients, they tell me some really intimate and private details, but it helps us to be able to understand, it helps them to be able to understand what blockages they might have, and it helps me to be able to coach them or to consult them in a way that fits with them, so that I'm giving them advice or strategy that aligns with their life and not just with their book. And so overcoming that perfectionism is huge, because then it's just really freeing, and you don't have to worry about trying to do things in a cookie cutter way. You don't have to worry about doing things the exact same way as someone else. And it makes it so that you are not having to have that internal voice in your head of like, okay, this is not right, when you kind of set the standard of what's right. Now, of course, within reason, of course, within publishing, of course, within marketing, there's certain parameters and certain things you want to do that just make sense. And there's certain things you want to do that are a good fit for your book. However, when you free yourself of comparison, and when you free yourself of looking over your shoulder of like, oh, well, they did it this way or they did it that way, and you just stay in your lane, then you realize that your only competition is you. And then it makes it a lot easier to put the thing out there. So to get your book done, to launch that marketing campaign, to post that reel that's been sitting in your drafts for forever and a day, because you're thinking, okay, I'm really just competing against myself. I'm trying to be better than how I was yesterday, or a year ago from today, or I want a year from now to look different as well. And so when you reframe it that way, it makes it a lot easier to accomplish that goal that you're trying to reach. So when you are feeling stuck in indecision, I want to remind you of a few things. You are never going to feel fully ready to release that book. Especially if you are in the editing phase, hear me. You're going to try to find all those errors, and then one's going to be hiding, and it's going to pop up as soon as you hit publish, or as soon as you get your copies, you're going to find something. That's just a standard practice. It just happens. Even in traditionally published books, even in textbooks, I found mistakes before. It's a thing. And so you're never going to fully feel ready to do the thing. So whether you are branching out in a new industry and you want your book to be released to be able to help build your authority, or establish your authority, I should say, whether you are trying a different strategy, so like with the podcast, I could only prepare so much that I could prepare. And then after a certain point, it's like, okay, you got to rip the Band-Aid off and you got to get out there, because you don't get the feedback. You don't get the insights by just planning. You get those things by doing. And so there's a quote that I love by Caitlin Batcher. She's an online marketer. And she says, she was on the Amy Porterfield podcast years ago, and she said that A minus work that never gets put out does nothing. B plus work that gets published changes lives. And those two are flip-flopped in terms of the order of it, but that's not the point. But basically, if you're stuck in perfection and you're thinking like, okay, I'm going to get everything perfectly done, everything's going to be perfect, which doesn't exist, and then you never release the thing, then that means people are not being impacted. So if you have a book sitting in your Google Docs or sitting in your drafts and it never gets published, that means that people that were supposed to get the transformation from the result that you provide are not going to get that transformation potentially because you were not a good steward of your gift. And that means that the people who, maybe you are a speaker, maybe the people who are supposed to see you on a stage at a certain event, are not able to get their breakthroughs because they didn't hear the word that has been deposited in you. And so one thing that also helps me as a believer to overcome this is to think about how, when I am sharing my gifts and my talents, I'm sharing the gifts that God has given me. I'm not sharing things that are from a selfish standpoint or a selfish place. And so I know that I've been given multiple talents, and I'm going to talk about that in a second, not in a place of arrogance, but in a place of really honing those things in and deciding what talents to focus on. But I understand that God has given me talents, and I understand that it's my job to use those talents to support people, to help them, to be able to change their lives. And so if I am not obedient to that, then that means someone else's breakthrough is caught up in me. And then that also means that I'm preventing my own breakthrough because I'm not working and operating in my gifts. And so thinking about the parable from the Bible of many talents, the servant who was given the money and then buried their money in the ground versus the servant who multiplied their money, the second one was praised because they actually were able to grow the investment that was given to them versus the one that just hid it in the ground. And so you are not an ostrich. I think that's the bird that sticks their head in the ground. You're not an ostrich. You are not someone who needs to bury your talents. You need to water them. You need to grow them. You need to get the coaching you need. You need to be in spaces with people who are going to support you and who are going to encourage you when you don't have the capacity or the energy to encourage yourself. And that is what helps me kind of stay centered and grounded and focused, because when you are in isolation and you are trying to figure everything out yourself without getting that support, then it makes it so that you, one, assume that you already have all the answers. And if this is something you've never done before, then that's just not going to be the case. And then two, you are blocking blessings for other people. So I'm going to leave that alone. I feel like I've touched on that enough. But when it comes to, also going back to the indecision piece, when it comes to being decisive and making sure that you are actually taking action, I'm going to give you a couple strategies to do that. And so maybe you're reeling from thinking, okay, should I include this chapter? Should I not include this chapter in my book? Should I apply to this event to be a speaker? Should I not? There are 4 things you can do to help you to be able to really map that out and think about the process. Now, some of them are going to be like, okay, well, duh, obviously I need to do that. But in all honesty, some of it is just that simple. Like, we overcomplicate it and we make it so much harder than it needs to be, when in actuality, if we just took the time to do the things, then we would save ourselves a lot of trouble when it comes to being stressed out about stuff or worrying about things. And so the ways to help you get out of your inaction or indecision is to decide. So this is actually a strategy I talk about within my framework, the book profit path. And with it, the first stage is to think about your presence. So think about, how do you want to be known? What do you want to use as your launch pad to attract people to your services, to your offers? And how do you want that to be clarified in your book's message? And so when you're thinking about what's the next thing you want to do, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a YouTube channel, whether it's doing a LinkedIn newsletter, whatever the case is, you want to think about what's going to align with you. So who are you? How are you positioning yourself? What kind of transformation are you trying to get your audience? And decide that, because once you decide that, then everything else becomes infinitely easier. Then the next part is to actually do the thing. So once you've made the decision, put steps into place to do the thing. Now, this doesn't mean take forever and a day to get it out. It doesn't mean to do it haphazardly, but find that sweet spot of, okay, I've gotten the launch pad of what I need. I know the strategies. Now I actually need to implement and put it into place. And one thing that I've realized and learned in business is that time moves quickly. And if you are not careful, the opportunity can pass you by in terms of what it is that's a good fit for what you're wanting to do, or what it is that is going to support your readers in the way you want them to be supported, readers, clients. And so then the third thing you want to do is deliberate. Now, I don't mean deliberate in the sense of you're spending forever and a day to make a decision in terms of what you've done, but I want you to actually analyze the steps you've taken. So you decided, you're doing the thing, but then actually take time to analyze the data and see what it's telling you. What things are working? What things aren't working? What shifts? I was combining pivots and shifts together. What shifts and what pivots do you need to make in order to make this sustainable? What shifts do you need to make in your mindset in order to do this consistently? And then how can you do this in a way that's going to be the most efficient and effective? And so let's think about an example. Let's say you are focusing on your book marketing and you have already released your book, you want to revive sales, and you are deciding on a marketing channel. Now, if you are someone who's going to be using YouTube, then there's certain benchmarks you want to have and certain things you want to get done in order to be able to grow your subscribers, in order to eventually get monetized, and also to attract folks back to you like to your site or to your lead magnet or things of that sort. And so you have to give that time to actually happen. That's not something that just grows overnight. You also have to really analyze your strategy and see, okay, am I doing a combination of YouTube shorts as well as doing long form content, which typically, if you're listening to this, your clients are likely going to want a mix of those things. And then your viewers, and clients actually, will likely want a mix of those things. So really deliberating and seeing, okay, am I trying this thing out to the full potential? Am I trying it out to the best of its abilities to actually be able to say it works or it doesn't work? Because one thing that I see often with clients is like, okay, well, or not clients, followers, most of my clients follow directions and do what they need to do to get the results they want to see. But people who are, I'll say, for example, on Threads, people will say, okay, well, I tried this and it didn't work. I tried a book launch and it didn't work. And then as I start to ask them more questions, I find that actually they did a release where they just put their book up on Amazon and told people to buy it. And so you haven't tried the strategy with fidelity. You haven't tried it in a way that's actually going to give you a clear picture of if this actually works. And so that's why it's so important to focus on this step, to actually do the thing. So decide, do the thing, and then actually deliberate and see if the thing is working before you make a shift or a pivot. Then the last step is to delegate. So you have analyzed what's working, and now you are able to bring on someone else to support you, whether it is a software tool that can support you or a human tool, and not in a bad way, but like a human to support you, like a virtual assistant, or someone to actually come on and do your book launches for you, like I do for customers. And that will help you to be able to not be so in the weeds with getting the item done. Going back to our YouTube channel, maybe you are having software support you with creating your captions, getting your timestamps, deciding what keywords to include in the caption. Maybe you are having someone or a tool such as Opus Clips be able to add the words on the screen for you, so that way you're not having to do that manually, and so that way it's more accessible to your audience. And so you may do this step a little earlier if you have the capacity. However, you don't want to do it so early that you're not fully aware of what actually is included in the steps. So you want to be mindful of delegating things before you actually understand what's required for those steps, because that's how you get scammed, that's how you get cheated, and that's just not a good situation for you. All right, so for the podcast, the way that I did this is I decided on my title, decided what audience I wanted to serve, and then I actually had to, of course, record the episodes, do the SEO research, which is kind of like the back end of how you get ranked on these different platforms. And then in time, I'll be able to deliberate. And because I already had some of the strategies in place beforehand that are in alignment with podcasts or that are in alignment with books, then I've been able to delegate some of these processes before. So you can go out of order. However, make sure you do it in a way that makes sense for you. And so I knew that I wanted to start this podcast because there were things that I had to say that authors, speakers, coaches, and consultants needed to hear that were outside of general social media. And when I say that, I mean like the Facebook, the Instagram, Twitter, and spaces like Threads. Now, although some of these have audio capabilities, it's not necessarily what people are going to that platform for. And I knew that my clients or potential clients are listeners. They might be listening on their commute. They might be listening while they're doing other things like I do. Like maybe while I'm prepping dinner, I might listen to a podcast episode. And like, I just love podcasts in general. And I typically attract people who are similar to me. And then I also knew that I didn't want to always pull out a camera to record. Now you will see some video episodes, but all of them will not be on video. And so I knew that it would be easier for me to pop up my microphone. It stays on my desk anyway, and that it was just a good fit for my life as opposed to always having to do a video post. Now I am still capitalizing on it to use both options. Like I mentioned, you will see video episodes, but it's not always going to be that way. And then I knew that I wanted to give clients and leads a way to connect with me off social media, because when you are relying on an algorithm, when you're relying on whatever things that they decided to change, which I just heard about some new changes to Facebook last night with the amount of links that you can add to your posts based upon whether or not you're Meta verified or not. As these things are continuing to change, you want to have a way to connect with your audience that's outside of those social media options. And so obviously social is great, but I knew that I wanted to diversify the ways in which I could connect with my audience. And so a podcast was the perfect way to do that. As well, I knew that it would help strengthen my awareness in terms of people who or visibility, people who might not know me or might not have heard my voice. And then it would give a way for people to be able to hear me like physically, but then also like have it sit within them. Like, I hear you and I hear what you're saying and it's resonating with you. And coming from an education background, auditory processing is something that is helpful for a lot of folks. Some people prefer that as a modality to be able to listen. And it just helps to build authority as well. And then it also just fits and aligns with my preferences and my lifestyle. And so in this episode, we talked about how to make decisions, how to get unstuck, and how to free yourself from indecision. And so if you are on the fence about deciding something, then I want you to shoot me a DM either on Instagram or Facebook, or email me directly and tell me what it is that you are trying to decide surrounding your book and or your book business. And so thank you for listening today. Be sure to like and subscribe and share this with another author or another author to be, a coach, consultant, or service provider who is trying to make those decisions in their business that can sometimes be tricky. And so as always, stay profitable.